Greetings and welcome to Retention Chronicles, the podcast with learnings from expert e-commerce brands and partners. I'm your host, Mariah Parsons. If you're here, you're either on a quest for e-commerce enlightenment or you accidentally clicked the wrong link. Either way, I am thrilled you stumbled into our corner of the internet and I hope you'll stick around. We've got pearls of wisdom for everyone, whether you're running a multi-million-dollar business or simply just starting out on your entrepreneurial journey. Before we unleash the brilliance of today's guest, let's give a shout out to our podcast sponsor, Malomo. Malomo is so much more than just another Shopify app. They're post-purchase wizards, making beautiful and branded order tracking smoother than a jazz solo, so our amazing founders, like our guests, can keep their customers happy and up to date while they track their orders. So hit that subscribe button, like it'll increase your LTV overnight, and go listen to our other episodes at gomalomo.com. That's GOMALOMO.com. Get ready for insights, chuckles, and perhaps a profound realization or two with this newest episode of Retention Chronicles. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Retention Chronicles. I'm psyched for our episode here today. Becca, thank you so much for joining me. I am so excited to dig into Romp Stomp with you. It's going to be a blast. For our listeners, I like to give them a little bit of background on how we met or how, you ended up in the seat here with me today. So we met at Female Founders, a female founders only retreat, I guess I'll call it. It was a Black Friday, Cyber Monday boot camp, had a blast. I think we hit it off early in the morning together. And then it was a whole day of, strategy and activities and Q&A. So there's a lot to take away. And now we're sitting here today to have a little bit of a more one-on-one, in-depth personal conversation. I couldn't be more excited. So we'll start off with you saying hi to our listeners and giving a background of yourself.
Awesome. Well, first off, thanks for having me. This is super fun. My name is Becca Mijares. I own a brand called Romp Stomp. We make toddler shoes that toddlers actually like to wear. So they're super easy to slip on. They slip on like socks, and then they have a rubber sole on the bottom that protects the little feet. But yeah, we're really focused on creating footwear that allows the natural movement of those little feet. And so yeah, I've been running the brand for it'll be 5 years in January.
Wow. I feel like 5 years is so long in the e-com world, but also nothing at all, where it's like you were 5 years ago. Did you envision starting this brand? Like, did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Tell our audience about what led you up to starting this brand 5 years ago.
Yeah, growing up, I was always thinking about different businesses I could start. I actually used to sell painted rocks
Love that.
at school and would get other my classmates to paint the rocks for me, and then I would just sell them.
Oh, you really had a full hustle. That is amazing. You were
Yeah,
selling off the work too.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was pretty influenced by my dad. He is an entrepreneur. He actually is a violin maker. So he has his own shop and he repairs and makes instruments. So he was always really encouraging of me to go out and hustle and do those things.
Oh, that is so cool. A violin shop. I think that's the first time we've had someone who is making their own instruments, or I guess related to it, on this show. I love the violin. It is, I think, one of my favorite instruments to hear live. So it has a special place in my heart. And that's really cool that, you have that, I guess, I don't want to say leadership, but I guess that guidance would be a better word for that, of oh, this is what an entrepreneurial journey looks like, even if it isn't, specific to ecom or, specific to the industry that you're in. You get to see the motivations and the things that it takes, I guess, mentally and emotionally, and more of the personal side of being an entrepreneur, even if it isn't super, the same industry. So that's awesome.
Totally.
Yeah. So tell us about when you decided you wanted to create your brand. tell us about why did you specifically want to go into creating a shoe for toddlers that moves with them, that fits like the natural foot? Tell us a little bit more about why you honed your focus in there.
Yeah. So while I was growing up, my sister was actually quite a few years younger than me. I think I'm like 8 years older than her. So, but growing up, I just remember she hated wearing shoes and just absolutely refused to keep them on. And so I always thought like, hey, like kids need better shoes. They grow up for the first year of their lives not having to wear shoes. And then all of a sudden, when they start walking, they have to wear these like clunky things on their feet that they're totally not used to. So that was always in the back of my mind. I was taking a class at my university. I went to BYU, and it was all about e-commerce and starting an e-commerce business. And so I saw some like stock shoe products and I was like, hey, this would be awesome for like babies and kids. And so um kind of just threw up a crappy website, got some shoes. They were really crappy, but like kind of the like concept of the sock shoe, and threw up some Facebook ads and just started selling them. And it just kind of blew up. We started right like in the beginning of COVID, and so kind of rode that e-commerce wave. Um, and yeah, it was really surprising. Like, I sorry, let me start over. Um, just seeing that my sister hated wearing shoes, and then having that connection like 5 years later, um, was really cool to see that solution come about.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny. And I like that you like you kind of call out that it was like crappy shoes, or that it was like, okay, these are model one of something that you're trying to sell, and just seeing if there's even a market there. Cause I feel like a lot of the times, um, one thing that could stop entrepreneurs or people that want to be entrepreneurs is feeling like they have to have the perfect product, the perfect site, the perfect XYZ to launch, and just like never getting around to it because something will never probably be perfect. Or if you want it to be perfect, like that's a lot of time and money up front for maybe not even knowing if there's
Yeah,
a market there, if it's something that's newer or like something that's innovative or something that isn't typically seen in the market. And so I love the, I guess, honesty or candor of being able to say like they were, certain quality of shoes, but they took off anyways. And that really, I'm sure in the moment you were like, oh God, like this is a good investment of if we can make it so that these shoes are of better quality, and we're learning and taking feedback from customers of what they want to change and what they'd like to see, then you can, you can develop the product to be sitting at a place where you're like, okay, these are great shoes now. And we have the customers that are willing to buy them and have a little bit of the lessons learned of having a website and running some ads on them. So I love that. Like, and I think it's very relatable to our audience of entrepreneurs who are, either trying to be entrepreneurs or are in the stages of starting it, or, maybe they're enterprise level, but I'm sure they recall the days of just being like, okay, what product is good enough to launch, or what marketing site is good enough to go live?
totally. Yeah, I was a poor college student, so I was like, I just want to start testing as soon as possible and iterating on that. And so yeah, I really like whenever people come to me and ask about like starting a business, I'm just like, there's so much power in just starting and then like iterating from that rather than overthinking and like being wrapped up in perfectionism.
Yes. Yeah, totally agree. So let's talk about the actual branding, because this is something that I always love to hear the founder's perspective on. Because anyone who's listening to this episode, I hope they'll go check out your Instagram or your website because it's very cute. And of course, like all things baby and children, I find adorable. Maybe other people don't, but I do. And so I will follow that line. But tell us about kind of the branding, like even down to how are you choosing, the colors and the name and the brand kit for something that is for kids, but you're marketing to obviously their parents. It's one of those I guess, industries, right? Like baby or kids, where you're specifically trying to pull in the parents' attention for their child. So I find it fun because other industries, obviously, you're marketing directly to the consumer who's going to use your product. So I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I like another testament to just like getting started. Like I just started out with a different name actually. It was used to be Memoir Kids, and kind of just went with the typical baby branding that you might see, very like pastel, very like lots of cursive and just a lot of softness. And then last year, uh, I just felt like we needed to have a refresh and stand out in the market. And so we did that through branding. So we changed the name to Romp Stomp. Um, and the goal with the rebrand was to really kind of embrace the fun, bold personalities of toddlers. It's just such a fun age where they're really like getting the personality and just loud and crazy. And it's just such a fun spirit that we wanted to incorporate into the brand. And so that Romp Stomp name is kind of a nod to the like kind of rowdiness, kind of craziness, but also stomp like with the shoe and with it's kind of fun. And then thinking about like the brand kit, I actually worked with a designer to find that bold feeling that I was looking for. Like I knew the feeling, but she was huge in helping us define those colors and the logo and the font to use. But then, yeah, we've just run with it. It was a huge project to rebrand everything. But I'm really happy with how it's turned out. And I really feel like our customers resonate better with our brand.
Yeah, yeah. I remember you telling me that in the in person at the Female Founders Only event. And that's why I wanted our listeners to hear, because one, it's just such a great name, like the duality of, a nod to toddlers being crazy and they will humble you even when they're not trying to, just because it's that funny stage of life where you don't have the awareness, right, of like what
Mhm.
is quote unquote good or bad or acceptable or not to say. So I do I love that that element of a toddler, even if as an adult you're like, wow, I just got humbled by a toddler. But
Yes.
the also though, like the business side of wanting the name and the brand kit to reflect a little bit more of the rowdiness that you don't typically get in, I guess, like I'll call it logo or like enterprise level baby
Mhm.
brands that we've all grown up with and seen through the years. Um, so it's so interesting, and paralleling that with the brand and developing as you're and changing as you're growing as a business. I would also love to hear how you're thinking about product development, because I think one of the things that makes what I love to see in like brands that I'm following is them choosing which product they're going to roll out, or like which pattern designs, which colorways. Um, I think it's just from being in e-commerce and being, entrepreneurial myself, loving to kind of pick apart different decisions and see like, okay, why did you go with this color over this color, or like the trends or the styles. So I'd love to hear your take on how you're deciding, you have your shoe, but how are you adapting it and you know um changing it with as you develop as a business.
Yeah, I think one thing again, just to like keep in mind is that like we're always trying to be better. And customer feedback is so valuable in that. Like when we're just talking about like the structural like components of the shoe, we're always working towards, another variation that we can improve upon. And I love Instagram for that. Just to have that like feedback of customers, like letting us know what colors they love or if they're experiencing any type of issues. That's been super useful to have. I think I don't know, it's so tricky when you're coming out with different patterns and like colorways, like new designs, because um you have to balance between kind of like being on trend as well as like what customers actually want. And I've noticed that can be different. And so recently I've been really trying to lean into the fact that like our shoes are like an article of clothing. And so we do need to be really tuned in with trends and like coming out with new designs. When I first began, I was just so focused on like the functionality of the shoe. But like people love to dress up their kids in cute outfits, right? And so yeah, it's been a learning experience for me, and I don't think I've honed it at all, but like I love being able to uh launch like a small drop, like a small like uh a couple colors, but in small number of units just to see how that does. And if that really resonates with people, we can build on top of that. So one example is our checkered shoes. That was kind of like a small launch that we did about 2 years ago, and people loved them. And so now we've iterated and come out with different colors with the checkered shoes. And so it's really just like experimenting. It's kind of hard because sometimes we will get like surveys, like I'll ask people what they want, and then it doesn't really reflect in like the like results of when we actually launch. So yeah, it's just you're always learning, and I think like my biggest piece of advice is to like start small and like just experiment on that and then just keep like iterating.
Yes, yeah, I love that. And so I think this would be a really valuable thing for our listeners to hear is when you say like launch small, how many like units specifically are you talking about per color wave? And I know I'm putting you on the spot, so if it's just like a generalization, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this is one of those things where it's like perspective matters so much because like small to one brand could be like 20 or 50, right? Or small to another brand could be 30,000 units. So I always like to try and see, like tactically when you're looking at, okay, color wave, and obviously it'll depend on the manufacturer and, what they can do and the price for all of that. But for you specifically, do you know the range off the top of your head of like when you're looking to maybe try like the checkered shoe or like a new color wave, how many orders you're actually ordering?
Yeah, I would like under 1,000 units. Kind of our number that we go for when we're testing something.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's very helpful. And then when you're thinking about like looking at trends, like I feel like where I see a lot of the trends of where I'm like, oh, that's really cute. Like I would want to wear that. Or just like for myself, I'm pretty heavily leaning on social media for that. And I feel like even before social media, it was like fashion magazines, right? Like more of the printed like PR or printed media. And so I'd love to get your take or understand where you're pulling inspiration for something being, quote unquote trendy. Um, are you looking at, social media or pop culture, kind of similar to where, I think a lot of consumers would be looking? Or are you looking to somewhere else of like trend predictors or anything of that sort?
Yeah, I look at like um I honestly don't remember where it was, but like I just pay attention a lot to the colors. Like and like I'll look up like trending colors for 2025 or whatever, and like it'll pop up, and I think it kind of pulls from like what's on the runway, like, and that kind of stuff. But also I just look at I think our designs turn out better when I kind of just trust my gut, and I think
Yeah.
it comes from like just like uh social media, what I see on Pinterest and that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, I honestly feel like I haven't figured it out, and I've been trying to be a little more on trend and pay attention to that. But honestly, sometimes I'm just like, I'm gonna create what I think is good, and sometimes it totally hits the target, sometimes it's totally off.
Yeah. And that's the gamble you take, I feel like that's what like Devil Wears Prada, right? Like they like that is a whole fashion industry and they're trying to predict trends of like
Mhm.
what will
Yeah.
be on the obviously like in the upper echelon of fashion and like seeing what runway styles are going to be and then how that translates down to consumer trends and all that stuff. So I
Hmm.
don't think there's ever right like there's not a perfect science, which is fun because people break the molds a lot of the time or can't predict things. Like I would say this past summer because of Barbie, hot pink is like utmost trending, which maybe it would have been without the movie or like Taylor Swift as well, just all these different things in pop culture.
Hmm.
Um, but I think why it's fun for me to walk down that path of like how are you trying to navigate it is because there's no simple answer to it. Like if it was
Yeah.
simple, you'd have like every single thing would be the same thing every season. And that's
Hmm.
not the case. So it's a fun, I guess I'll call it a fun thought experiment to just be like, okay, where are you even attempting to try and look?
Yeah,
And I think following your gut is a great nod to, sometimes it'll hit, sometimes it won't. And that's just also part of being an entrepreneur and taking a gamble, right?
totally.
Okay, so we've kind of talked about the like product development side, how you're coming about launching your brand or how you came about launching your brand and thinking about all the things behind it. Um, and you mentioned you use Instagram specifically for customer feedback, which I think is really interesting because I think a lot of brands would be scared to see like anything negative or even constructive on social media. Just like in comments, because I think there's this fear of like, oh my God, someone saw this one bad comment. So they're not, that's gonna not demotivate or unmotivate, whatever the word is. They're not gonna purchase because of that one comment. And
Hmm.
so I think it's interesting that you enjoy or you like seeing those comments. And I would love to wrap that into a conversation around acquisition and using social media, whether it's organic or paid, to reach your audience, because I haven't heard people using social media for, I guess, customer feedback or product development and being, I guess, excited about it or like enjoying it. I feel like a lot of the time social media people are trying to mitigate, and that's understandable because like nobody, it's stressful to see negative things.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like people understand that nothing's going to be perfect in a brand, and to be able to see how a company responds to those imperfections is a huge trust builder. And so when we get those negative comments, I really do like to just respond and say like, "Hey, we care about this a lot and want to find a solution for you, whatever it is." And then responding in that way, I think really, yeah, just builds that trust. Another reason I like to use social media for like product feedback is like just through messaging. So if someone leaves a a comment about something we can improve on, I love to just message them and really have a conversation about it, and they'll really open up and talk about it. And again, that's just like building that relationship with customers, which is huge. Um, so as for acquisition and like getting customers, I really feel like it's been I feel like organic social media is so hard um to predictably acquire customers. So I really love to use Instagram for like community building rather than like acquisition. And then we use paid media for really reliably acquiring customers. So that's kind of how I view that, where I try not to focus so much on really selling the shoes as much in our organic social media rather than just providing value and like trying to build that community. Um, it can be tricky, but that's kind of like my take on social media.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And especially your social media is a lot of like DIY or a lot of activities, like a lot of things that aren't like specifically focused to your product. They're more just like I guess circular or what's auxiliary or like just
Hmm.
related to being a parent or having a kid or just like I guess being in that world of someone who would eventually or is currently a customer of yours. And so I feel like that fits really well, obviously, into community building and more like education or providing value. Because assuming, parents are going to be the ones who are following and engaging with your content, and that's exactly what you
Hmm.
want. Um, finding like new activities or new DIY ideas to kind of like draw them in and be like, oh, what's this account that's posting about how to make this specific toy at home or specific activity at home and like why are they doing that? So I love that approach. Like I was of course stalking your Instagram and was just like this is so fun and such a creative way to obviously engage with your customers that isn't like here's the top 3 reasons we're rolling out this product or why your kid is going to love Romp Stomp. So the question for you in that is where are you pulling the inspiration for those posts from? Because I know like I manage business social media accounts. I manage my own one, which is just funny to say manage, but I think it sounds fun. So I use
Hmm.
it with my personal account. And it is, when you're trying to post daily or multiple times a day, inspiration sometimes can be lacking. Whereas other times it's like hitting you, like ping, 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 your brain is going off and has like 5 ideas in 1 minute. Um, so how are you like, do you have any system, I guess, of how you think through content that you want to put on there of like, oh, this would be a really fun activity to put on there, or are you being inspired by like things around you? Is there any type of system that you have for trying to create that content?
Yeah, it's tricky to be like posting consistently and having content for that. I think one thing that I've kind of adopted is just feeling like, one really good, valuable reel is worth more than five, like kind of crappy mid-level reels, right? And so I really try and focus. It's hard because you need to get the volume to see what really resonates with people, but I really try and focus on quality. And so that's one thing, so that we don't have to be coming out with like 10 new reels every week. Um, but I love Pinterest. Pinterest is like so good for just getting inspiration on activities specifically for like young kids. Um, and whenever I get an idea, I just write it down in my Notion. I use Notion like religiously to keep track of ideas. But another helpful resource is Ask the Public, I think it is.
Mm,
Um,
I haven't heard of that.
I'll explain it if I'm saying the name wrong. I don't remember it, but you can just type in like a search term and then it comes up with like questions that people have about that search term. So if you like type in toddlers, then it'll like come up with searches that people search about toddlers. So one of them uh that did really well for us was like what to do if your toddler is biting. Like I would have
Oh,
never thought of like coming out with content about that, but like I could see that people were searching that. And so we made a reel about that and also like an email newsletter. Um, and so using that to like kind of answer concerns or like questions that people already have is super useful. And then I love to recycle that content across all of our platforms so that, you can work smarter, not harder
yes, yes.
there.
I know that on TikTok too, they have, I just literally looked it up because I was like, I have not heard of this. How have I not heard of this? Anyways, on TikTok they have like searchable, and I think is it answer the public?
Yes,
Okay.
I
Okay.
think that
Just
is.
wanted to make sure so our
Yeah.
listeners can go. I'm sure they
Yes.
would find it because I found it immediately. But TikTok has I forget the feature name, but you can basically go and search kind of similar of like where's there a gap for content and what are people searching
Mm,
for? And I was like, that is a brilliant move by TikTok.
I love
For all the
that.
content creators out there who are really trying to, understand what people are asking. So
Yeah.
that's a really, really good piece of advice for trying to find something that's like circular content or auxiliary content around specific keywords. Um, and you surprised me, Becca, which is good because there's a lot of things that I've heard of in the marketing world, and that is not one of them. So kudos to you.
Cool.
um, let's talk about real quick strategy around ads, just because you've been in the space for 5 years. You hit it off with ads working for you in the beginning, which is not a easy feat. If anyone knows ads, that is not
Yeah.
wouldn't pair ads and easy together. So talk to us about like lessons learned in the beginning. What worked for you? Is it still working for you, or have you had to adjust given e-commerce boom post COVID, all that stuff. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about how you approach it.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, I really didn't know much. I was taking like a course in my university about like Facebook ads and stuff. And so that's kind of where I started. And mostly started with like videos and just kind of demonstrating the shoes. And I think like one thing to be thinking about is like the first step to really winning at ads is if you have a product that's really easy demonstratable um, in ads, and to be able to visually show like the problem that you're solving. And so one win that we had in the beginning was figuring out what visual really hooks people in about our product. And that's like the slipping on of the shoes. So I would have the same ad, except for like the first 4 seconds of the ad was different. And
Mm.
always, always, always the ad starting with pulling on the shoes would win. Um, and so we've used that in our marketing, like moving forward, always showing that motion of slipping on the shoes just because it is so visually interesting. Another thing that's really worked for us in the beginning and now is pretty simple, but showcasing the problem that people have and then how the product solves that problem. So I work with some like UGC creators, and I always try and get them. Sounds kind of bad, but like I want to see like kids being upset about wearing normal shoes
That
or
is
like
funny.
tripping in the shoes. Like if we get a good shot of that, like that's awesome. um like sad for the kid, I don't want them but
Yeah, of
like
course, of
it's
course.
a really great way to show the problem and then how our shoes are the solution to that. But at the end of the day, to win ads you just got to test a bunch of different creatives, and um it you never know what's going to hit and what's going to flop. But I just try and get like new ads in every week to test, to help performance. Like that's the biggest thing.
Wow, new ads every week. That's not an easy feat.
It is not, but again, I try and really recycle content. And so some of the content that we do use for like reels when we are like focused on the shoes, oftentimes if that does well on reels, it will translate pretty well to ads. Like I'll make a couple tweaks, but yeah, I try to utilize that content as much as I can.
Yes, makes sense. You've also the ad idea of like slipping on the socks and testing out like the movement or which element of the product that you're demonstrating in the first couple of seconds. I also haven't really heard that tactical of advice before. So love it again. Good
Yeah,
job, Becca.
it's
Um,
huge. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no, because I can like envision that in my mind, right? And like I'm also envisioning like flexing the actual shoe like like a sandwich or something like that,
Hmm.
for the viewers who aren't watching the video. And it is a very demonstratable, very visual product. And I think that's a really smart way to go about ads, is like just what can you tweak and A/B test? Because a lot of the times I feel like people go with copy, of course, or thinking about like graphics, but then the video component of, okay, just change the first couple of seconds. And what are you changing? It's the mobility of the shoe or whatever, you know, movement of the product is a really smart approach. So I love that. Um, for the last like 10 minutes or so, would love to talk about retention because obviously we're on Retention Chronicles. It's my bread and butter, as I have always told our listeners. And so when you're thinking about customer retention, what is, I guess, one of the like aspects of the customer journey that you're like, we have had this, it has been super critical for us. This like this has helped us retain so many customers. And then what's one thing that you're looking forward to like adapting or adding to your strategy? Because I think that's always a fun question to ask is, what's one thing that's worked really well and what's one thing that you're excited about to experiment in the future?
Yeah, I think really, I mean, this is probably a pretty typical answer, but like utilizing email marketing and SMS marketing has been huge for us. Um, like, and being with people on the journey of wearing our shoes, um, since toddlers will grow out of shoes so quickly,
Mm,
having those email flows like 6 weeks after the first purchase of like, hey, you want to size up, like that's huge. And to have that automated, like it's so nice, right? So we really utilize a lot of flows there. Again, kind of with like just um, feedback. I love to send out a personalized email to each of our customers. It's a flow in Klaviyo, but it's like a plain text email from me. I'm saying like, hey, thank you so much for ordering. Would love to hear any feedback you have. Thank you so much for supporting our small business. And then I get so many email replies from that. So it's a huge win because customers kind of get an introduction to me and know that like I'm a founder that really cares about their experience. And then number two, it really helps with like email deliverability with like getting replies back to your email. Like that's a huge like signal to inbox providers that like you're a reputable sender. So that's been awesome. Um, as for like new opportunities, I this goes into product development, but it is tricky because our shoes only go up to 3 years old. And so like um expanding our product line in order to serve our customers longer is probably top of mind for us. Because we work so hard to acquire those customers and then we can only serve them for like 2 years max. So I would say that's like top of mind for us moving forward.
yeah, yeah, those are great calls for both of those. Um, and it is so, yeah, the email deliverability piece there is a good call out because I know that obviously there's a lot of adjustments with email and privacy and cookies and all that fun stuff that the technical side of the customer experience and marketing always got to stay on top of it. And I love that you're thinking about like, okay, the relationship between the customer is so important. And how can you, as a founder, automate but still personalize an email and like read those responses? I think that is something that like even if you're in e-commerce or even if you're in marketing, that that's like probably not the founder clicking send this email at this very moment, right? But people
Mhm.
understand that you're getting those emails back and you're willing to read them. I think that's what goes a long way with people who get those personalized emails from a founder saying, like, exactly like you said, thank you for supporting our small business and thank you for, you know, purchasing with us. Please let us know if there's something that you wish was different, blah, blah, blah. Um, and so I love that call out and then expanding the product line to continue to serve customers who want your products, but you just haven't been able to, dedicate resources there. I think are very two smart answers. And I would love to hear your take as well with when you're thinking about, like how to level up or where to go to next. Cause obviously, like retention is one of those things where everyone knows it's important, but there's a lot of different areas that you can go to with it. So when you're thinking about like, okay, we're getting to this stage where now we can develop past 3 years, or, we're going to get to that stage in a year. What kind of resources or where are you looking to try and draw on like business plan growth or business model growth in e-commerce? Because obviously there are a ton of resources out there just from being able to connect with founders like at the event that we met at, or podcasts like we're doing right now, or webinars or XYZ. There's a ton of resources out there. But I always love to hear where specific founders are going to kind of like level up, or to see, what is being published in this newsletter of like, oh, I should really consider that. Do you have any of those examples of like your go-to favorite resources?
Yeah, I really like uh the podcast put on by Common Thread Collective. Those are awesome. Um, and then honestly, I love Twitter for
Mm-hmm.
or X for any like what's just going on in e-commerce, just following founders there. That's huge. And I think also, um, I think lately it's for me, I've been so bombarded with like things of what I need to do in my business and like consuming that content. I've kind of taken a little step back and been like, okay, this is awesome. And I also need to do what's best for my business and like decide for myself, if that makes sense. Because it can be tricky when you're looking at resources where like one resource will completely contradict the other, right? And so just kind of like taking all of it in with a grain of salt and then realizing that like I'm the founder and I am going to do what's best for my business has been really empowering for me lately to do. So I don't have a ton of resources now just because I've kind of slowed down with it. But yeah, and then I think just in-person uh events or like networking can be so powerful um and that's been huge for our like opportunities that we get or just kind of problem solving things is to just talk about your problems and then a lot of times someone will have that solution. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, love it. Are there any like in-person events or conferences that you would highly recommend for founders off the top of your head?
Um, Most of them are local to Utah. I am like part of some e-commerce groups in Utah, and those have been super helpful. Um, but yeah, just like getting out and like talking about your business and problem with like other people, you'll be surprised at like maybe that person doesn't know anything that can help you, but they probably know someone. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I love it. I remember connecting at the event we met at, which shout out Mackenzie Bauer and female founders only, because I realized I haven't actually chatted out Mackenzie, but I connected another founder with someone I met on the podcast because she was like, I'm having this issue and I need someone. And I was like, I actually know exactly someone that you should chat with. So great real life example of that. And I absolutely love that you're just taking a step back, because it's sometimes overwhelming, and that is very real, of just like, you know what, I know all these things are probably good, but I'm going to take a step back because it's not good to be overwhelmed by all of them. So I appreciate the honesty there. One last question for you. Is there anything like promotions or launches or just like strategy that you want to share with our audience? I think it's always a fun question to ask, so I'd like to try and reserve the last couple of minutes of the podcast to do so.
Yeah, so I think this will be coming out in November, so we'll be in the middle of our Black Friday sales. So every week we're going to be having a different um, promotion there. So if you want to um, get notified about that, you can sign up for our email list on our website, rompstomp.com. Yeah, I think that's it.
Amazing. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Becca, for making the time. This has been a joy. I'm so impressed by your knowledge of just all the questions that I'm throwing at you. So thank you for being willing to share. And I know our audience is really going to love this episode.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.